Check, check. All right, guys. First of all, I want to say thanks to the NCLS team. What a treasure of an opportunity you cadets have here. I had no clue that this event even existed prior to them giving me the invite to come speak here. And the key is really to translate and for you to have an insight into all those folks that are a little bit more experienced than you guys, to see where the foundations of the academy build up, and then you can see later on how you could possibly be able to implement those strategies and those leadership solutions. I first want to say thanks again to my escorts, Cadet Coleman and DeHart. They've been world-class here in making sure I stay out of trouble here at the academy. And then I'm a ROTC grad, as I already mentioned, and I never truly appreciated how special the Air Force Academy is until coming here. This is my first time here, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I really get the sense of the one team, one fight. Okay, you're all united against the common purpose, and there's small little pieces that I see that I'm sure you guys don't even see and come to appreciate yet of just the camaraderie and how these little things that they do in the Cadet Corps that builds that team aspect. So thanks again. All right, so I'm here because of a B-1 incident that happened last May. And by show of hands, can I get some hands raised of who's heard of the Hawk 9-1 incident last May? Okay, for all of you that don't know, you'll be getting an intro here. But to sum it up, we had a B-1 and caught on fire, and we had tried to get out, and it didn't work, and then we adapted and overcame. That's a short summary. All right, how many of you guys are interested in aerospace? Aerospace. How many civilians? We got a couple civilians, mostly cadets out here, okay? The theme of this talk is it's a aerospace or aviation-centric talk, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave in some different lessons throughout my career that was able to prepare me for adversity in this one single event. And my career has not been without blemish, okay? I've had some really serious screw-ups all throughout, technically, professionally, you name it. But the lessons I learned from those only made me stronger, and I was able to take tidbits here and there, and of which I'll kind of spell out for you guys of where I got that, and it helped me prepare for this adversity that faced me later on. So we're here at the NCLS, so the character and leadership. We're here to learn about leadership, but give me a show of hands, how many people think character is the foundation for leadership? Do you think you can lead without character? Okay, and I would agree that it's truly the foundation. So here's a little background about me. We already have just a little bit of what I'm working on now. I first started off at LSU, and I was a biological sciences major, and I had a medical scholarship my sophomore year, so I was planning on being a doctor. My interest in medical school versus military studies kind of slowly started to swap, and then they were completely upended and backwards of what my interests were by the end of my third year of school. So I went ahead and made the courageous decision that summer. I had all my letters of recommendation done for medical school. I was ready to submit my application. I had the application open on my computer, and all I had to do was click, okay? But my gut was really talking to me and saying that's really not what you're supposed to do. The spidey sense, gut feeling, whatever you name it, it kept me from that, okay? So I made the leap, talked to my PAS, Professor of Aerospace Studies at the time, and he went to bat for me and tried to get me the best job that I could in the Air Force following. There's a backstory to that. The best advice I ever received, professional advice, was always work your tail off wherever you are, and regardless of what you're trying to do next, everything will fall into place. And ladies and gentlemen, my career, 15 years in the Air Force, is a testament to that, and it's been a hell of a ride, because I'm not really worried too much about what's next. Obviously, I plan a little bit, but you just work. You're present in the moment. You work at your hardest. Bring your A game every day, and things will work out. So my PAS went to bat for me. All my buddies had already gotten their pilot slots. I had one shot at the supplemental board. He went ahead and threw my name in, and I got it. And the rest is history, okay? So take that leap of faith if you need to. Can you imagine third years whoever my third years are here, changing everything within right prior to your senior year, it takes a leap of faith. And I thank the Air Force for making that happen for me. So after college, went to pilot training, did well enough to get T-38s, selected for bombers to the B-1, went to my first ops tour at Dyess Air Force Base. It's in West Texas, Abilene, Texas. Had that first ops tour. I was lucky enough to, that was whenever, well, it's Desert War still going on, but the focus was the surge at the time in Afghanistan. We were fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda both. Really good deployment, but there was a real huge mistake that I made there that really set the stage, and it was a really big wake-up call for me that I needed to kind of shift my priorities and really get back on track, and I'll tie that into the story. After Dyess Air Force Base, I needed a change, so I went to instruct pilot training, T-38s, the advanced trainers, at Columbus Air Force Base. And that's really where I came into my own. I had lots of leadership opportunities. My leadership really trusted me. They gave me a lot of rope to play with. And I also had a lot of responsibility because I was responsible for my students and their futures. And I didn't take that lightly. From there, I went back to the B-1 up in Ellsworth, South Dakota, which is near Rapid City, Mount Rushmore area, which is beautiful. The base is magical. The squadron, it was magic. The teamwork that we had there against the common goal is worthy of a case study. But there were challenges there too, and some things I learned there, which I'll tie in. After that, Barksdale Air Force Base. Right now, I'm staff. Again, I worked hard where I was at the previous assignments. Didn't get to go to ACSC in residence, but my leadership still saw promise, and then they sent me off to staff. Okay, I'm lucky enough to get to staff. Some people aren't. Now, some people say, well, what's so good about staff work? But the impacts that you can have during staff work is far-reaching. I'm working on projects right now that have effects for the next 20 years. And the impact that you have to all your wings, squadrons, all my buddies back in all the squadrons, it's phenomenal. So the goal is not to become a staff officer, right? So you want to be the best you can as a tactical aviator, your technical specialty, okay, whatever you're in. And it is one team. We can't do it without everybody's help. So I'm at Barksdale, and it is the best job because not only do I get to have this impact, but it's a flying job. So I've been flying for 10-ish years, and there's these positions on staff, flying positions. So I actually get to travel back to my old base at Dyess and fly with the flight training unit, which trains brand new B-1 aviators, WIZOs and pilots. And whenever this whole incident happened last year, it was my number 3 sortie with that squadron, flying students. It was my 3rd student sortie. So this goes into the whole preparedness, okay? You never know when you will face that challenge, okay? So make sure you're prepared and treat that the opportunity to prepare. As aviators, as people, okay, professionals, we always want to learn from everybody else's mistakes. We don't want to make those same mistakes. So anytime there's an aircraft accident, incident, mishap, there's a safety board and a safety study that comes out, trying to identify exactly what went on, what was the first step, what caused it, what were all the contributing factors that made that happen, and what was if there was one thing that could have prevented that whole thing. Sometimes it's pilot error, it's aircrew error, it could be maintenance, it could be something, it could be an installed part incorrectly, it could be just a mechanical malfunction, okay? But you try to figure all that out. And I am one for trying to be prepared, okay? My family, you can, all you guys, right? Pretty much everyone can relate to the lessons that you learned from your family way back when. So at one point, whenever I was at Columbus, time frame doesn't quite matter, there was one specific safety report that I really took to heart. This one airplane was flying. It started having a flight control malfunction, okay? So it wasn't acting properly. And for layman's terms, it would just start bucking a little bit, okay? So it was just a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. And this one flight control surface that was causing that, or the flight control system that was causing that, there was one switch that controlled that system. However, there was no procedure in the technical order to deal with that malfunction because they hadn't ever seen that malfunction before. So the bucking kept on getting more and more, stronger and stronger. G-force is increasing. There's only a certain limit that the jet can withhold before it breaks up in the air. And that's what it did. There's no ejection seats. The whole crew was lost. So I really took that to heart and internalized that, saying, you never know what you're studying now could be that one switch. That one system that you really understand and you hypothesize this could be what's going wrong. It's not the procedure, but this is what I'm going to do because I think it's going to work. So I always look for that one switch. But you never know what that one's going to be. Okay? So taking that lesson on. Okay, this is the B-1 incident and aircraft story. There's a couple things that I need to introduce you guys so you can follow along in the story. There's two components. First of all, those that don't know, that's a B-1. Okay? Flown by the Tigers, 37th Bomb Squadron, best bomb squadron in the Air Force. That's up at Ellsworth. Okay, there's two components, two systems that are very important in the story today. One is the ejection system up here, okay? And then one is the area of the over-wing fairing, which is right behind the wings. B-1, designed in the 60s and 70s. It's canceled in late 70s by Carter, resurrected by Reagan, built, rolled off the assembly line in 84, 5, and 6. Sorry, 5, 6, and 7. We sit two pilots, two Wizzos in the front seat. You got pilot, co-pilot, but we can switch sides. You can do any job from either side, either system, or either seat. In the aft station, on the right side, is the offensive systems operator, OSO, or Wizzos. So the OSO is responsible in World War II speak. He's the combination bombardier, navigator. He operates the radar, and we also have a targeting pod, so all offensive systems, okay? Left seat is the DSO, defensive systems operator, and he is responsible for our radar jamming, our countermeasures, expendables, so chaff, flare, and then we also have a tow decoy. So if there's a surface-to-air missile threat, he'll set the system up so that it jams that SAM system. So the overwing fairing here, the overwing fairing is very important. The wings sweep back, and it's hydraulically actuated, so it lifts up and lets the wings sweep back. So whenever we're on the ground, it's open. Once we start the takeoff roll, it clamps down on the wings as they're forward, and then whenever the wings sweep back, it opens up and clamps down. Now, that's the function of it, but the overwing fairing area inside those bags there is a very critical point of the B-1 structure. Pretty much every system has something that runs through that area. You got huge fuel tubes and fuel lines, bleed air that runs through that area, and you also have wiring harnesses that run through that whole area. And the key takeaway here is that the first B-1 crash, the first B-1 that we lost, the B-1B anyway, it was due to a fire in this area. And they didn't have any fire suppression system in that area. So after they lost that one, they went ahead and installed some fire suppression. So for the fire suppression system, we have bottles, so fire extinguishers, that we can put in each engine, surrounding each engine, and then we also have 2 bottles to squirt into each overwing fairing. Because it's so important, you get 2 bottles for those. All right, so that's the overwing fairing, and then here's the ejection system. The ejection system is designed, you have 2 modes, an automatic mode and a manual mode. So the automatic mode, whenever you're in auto, any front station cockpit member, a pilot, can pull the handles and the seat will automatically sequence out. So it's a certain sequence, it's split seconds, or you could just do it manually, each individual person be your own seat commander. And that'll play in later on. All right, this is so that you can fly along with me as we tell this story, okay? Front cockpit, B1. You have control sticks, individual, ejection seat handles. You never want to pull those unless you got to. You have the wing sweep lever. It's manually operated, okay? And then you each have throttles. And then right here, this is the fire extinguisher panel. All 4 engines, 1, 2, 3, 4, from left to right, and then the right and left overwing fairing, fire push buttons. Okay. Oh, this is the WISO station in back. This is the old cockpit. We're going through a big technology upgrade. We're upgrading to glass. This is the old screen. This is what 75% of the fleet is updated with these. But this is where the OSO is sitting, and this is where the DSO would be sitting. There's a window way down here, which is the B1A was made to be a capsule that would eject, and then they switched to ejection seats for the system after one of the test pilots died in one of the ejections after they lost the first B1A. Okay, we'll go back to May 1st of this last year. Remember, this is my 3rd student sortie that I've flown on. Both our students were midway through the program, so very capable, okay? They've ironed out most of the basic deficiencies. They know how to fly. They're just kind of tuning up and getting up to the proficiency level needed. Our mission, this is the Dias dot here. I know it looks like it's a little bit washed out, but here's Dias. We're supposed to fly to Lancer, which is a MOA, kind of like a parking lot in the sky to where you can fly around, for layman's speak. And we're supposed to do a couple hours there. We're supposed to go meet a tanker up near Albuquerque. And if you could picture Texas, I know it's kind of washed out, but this is the shape of Texas here. Sorry, up here. So Albuquerque, we're supposed to do some air-to-air refueling for our co-pilots, and then we're supposed to do a low-level route hugging the south border of Texas. From there, we're supposed to go back to Dias and then do some transition work, which is touch and goes, landings, emergency patterns, etc. For the pilots. I was number 1, so Hawk 9-1. Out of a formation of Hawk 9-2, I was the flight lead. And my wingman, very experienced wingman, he was the squadron commander, lieutenant colonel of the squadron that I was flying with, of the FTU. And the history between me and my wingman go way back. He was the first supervisor I ever had in the B1. He was my first flight commander, so we have a very good working relationship. He's my first mentor. Glad I had him that day, for sure. So we take off out of Midland, out of Dias. Take off a little bit late. We end up meeting our wingman up here, up in, catch the backside of the air-to-air tanker track. And we were supposed to transit on down to our IR low-level route. So the IR route, en route to the IR route, we had a couple training beans that we needed to accomplish. Okay, so a couple items that our students were missing. So our WISO, who's sitting right behind me, he needed to do an INS, a GPS out INS type of event to where he would manage the navigation system without the GPS telling it exactly what to do. So INS is inertial navigation system. GPS, I think we all know what that is, but without the GPS feed, you have to manage it to make sure you're in the right spot. So the way it works is if you don't have the GPS feed smacking it, telling it that I'm right here, I'm right here, I'm right here, then you take a radar map and you tell the jet, hey, I'm 30 miles, I know where this point is, I'm 30 miles at this azimuth, and I know I'm here, and you're supposed to manage that throughout. Well, we had a lot to do today, so we also had a lot of maneuvers that we needed to do to train our front station pilots. So we gave minimal time to manage that INS system, and that's going to come into play. So we're doing our formation maneuvers all throughout that INS management, and it didn't quite manage it all that great. Because whenever we came to IR 178, the low-level route, point alpha, we call on the radio, Hawk 9-1, point alpha, and then our wingman comes back, hey man, we're at point alpha. We're showing you guys almost in Mexico. You guys need to turn left. All right, strike one, okay? Not so confident in this nav system. So we start our low level, we drop down, we sweep the wings back to go fast. We let down to 1,000-foot AGL above the ground level. Speed up 540 nautical miles ground speed, which is 9 miles a minute. And there's beautiful terrain down here. I've flown this route about 50, 100 times. It's a real nice route, real mountainous, you wouldn't think. And it dumps out up here, but Big Bend National Park is right in this direction. Chisos Basin, great hiking if you haven't been there. And then in this corner right here is 9 Point Mesa. It's kind of a pre-pylon turn to turn north. Okay, that'll come into play. All right, so we do our, about halfway through here. So we'd already had the point alpha where we weren't supposed to be, and we were supposed to, there's this really cool ridge that we're supposed to butt up against, okay? So if you picture this front of the stage as a ridge line, we're supposed to parallel right underneath the bottom of the ridge line as we fly. And I know I'm supposed to be parallel on this ridge line, but I'm headed directly at it, perpendicular, okay? Strike two. Not really where we're supposed to be. Continue on to this mountain here, 9 Point Mesa, which I've already talked about. 9 Point Mesa, supposed to be right 1 o'clock. It is not right 1 o'clock. So I tell my Wizzos, hey, where are you guys showing the mountain? Where's 9 Point Mesa? Hey, it's right 1 o'clock. I said, no, it's not. It's left 11 o'clock. Strike three. We're out. I do not have any confidence in that navigation system at this point. So back to Dead Reckoning. Pioneer pilot type, clock to map to ground. I got my map. I know exactly where I'm supposed to be based off of headings. Also at this 9 Point Mesa, it's a nice 90-degree turn where we head north. So it's a really good point to give a practice threat maneuver for our student pilots. So a threat maneuver would be, hey, there's a SAM system. This way we get, we're picking up that it's tracking it, and we need to turn away. We don't have anything we can shoot at it. Okay. One runs away bravely, very fast, I might add. So I give them a practice threat reaction. Hawk 9-1, out left, reference 360, of which Joe, my co-pilot, does a great job. Push up throttle, makes the turn happen, full AB. As we're in this turn, we're approaching a small hill. And what happens whenever you go above a hill when you're flying, or whenever you're driving, you're supposed to feel a bump, right? So what if you're going over the train tracks in your car, or you hit a pothole, and instead of going up and down, something kicks you to the right, and you feel a little yaw? That's what happened to us. So as I'm looking at this, I feel that shift to the left and right. Spidey sense. That's not supposed to happen that way. And before I could sub-vocalize to myself, that's probably nothing, I couldn't even finish it, the entire caution panel lit up. So multiple bleed airs. Bleed airs are bad, by the way. You got hot air leaking out somewhere where it's not supposed to be. All kinds of other caution lights came on, and then before I could even look at all of them, the fire tones start going, and the fire lights lit up. Number 3, 4, right over wing fairing. So I talked to my co-pilot. Joe, our command. Climb, climb, climb. Joe does a great job, pushes up the throttle, starts his climb up, getting away from the ground. That's priority number 1. I tell him, keep the power up, expect loss of thrust. I'm going to be shutting down that left side. Joe climbs up. By the way, as this is going on, after the climb, expect the loss of thrust. Guys, improve your positions. That's a nugget to the aft station that, hey, I think we all know how this is going to end up. because there's never been any B1 that recovered from an overwing fairing fire indications. We didn't know that we were able to do that later on. So it's going down, right? You kind of know where the story would end, or we thought we did. So as we climb up, we climb safely above the ground, start applying the boldface. Boldface is critical action procedures. So they're procedures that are so important that you have to commit to memory because you don't have time to reference the checklist. So I start going through those, prioritize the overwing fairing fire, push button first, push that push button, it shuts down all fuel flow to that entire side. Subsequently shutting down those two engines, it kind of automatically happens due to fuel starvation, and we got them in max AB, so it ain't going to last long on that side. Fire push buttons are depressed. Squirt the extinguishing agent into that overwing fairing, wait the appropriate amount of time, hack the clock, and then squirt the second one. And then prioritize the next two engines. Okay, working from right to left, pushing the third fire push button, getting that bottle fire extinguisher shot into that engine, cowling, and then the next one. We're climbing, we're set. Good news is the fire extinguishing agent worked, partially. So we still had a huge fire, glowing hot red in that fire light in number 3. And the tones are still going off, folks. And it is very disorienting. It is against your being to be sitting in an aircraft that has this fire warning tone going on, and you are taught that throughout your entire aviation career. So we applied the boldface procedures, like I said, and we're trucking along. Fire's still going out, and there's nothing left to do. There's no other step in the checklist. You can't just blow the fire out or anything. There's nothing else you can do, so it's just a waiting game at this point. Knowing in the back of my mind how this game has always ended, I just wanted to give it a little bit more time. Okay, the firelight's still not out. Okay, maybe it's still not out. And it's still not. Okay, guys, improve your positions. Maybe they could improve it a little bit more, I don't know. And then you're just sitting there, and I gave it enough time. So the danger of these fires, I used to teach my students whenever I was a UPT instructor that you always had time whenever you were handling an emergency. Always had time. No jet has ever just blown up in midair. The last one did, folks. So the last time we had this overwing fairing fire, it was just the right spot where it happened, and it did. So that was in the back of my mind, and I was not about to sacrifice these other brave folks, just waiting for that jet. So I had reached that point where my comfort zone is already long gone, but now it's definitely done. Hey guys, the fire's still going. We have to get out. We have to eject. So I called around the horn, prep for ejection, made sure we were all in manual. I already talked about the different sequence in auto and manual in the ejection seat. And in the manual mode, so in the auto mode, as it's sequenced out with those milliseconds, automatically there's a possibility of a component crew member interaction. So as these whole sides, top and bottom, blow off of the aircraft, okay? So there's a chance that with those split seconds, my front hatches, if there's a delay in these seats, can hit that other guy. And I don't want that to happen. There's already enough risk with an ejection sequence where I just did not want to do that, which was against what the common technique was, which anytime you can, do auto and trust the system. And I wanted to avoid that. So what we did, we made sure we were in manual mode for ejection. We called ready, crossed the horn. I had knee boards stuck to our legs, both of our pilots, and we started unstrapping, and we piled it all up. So right before that happened, we piled it up. I made sure everybody was still ready to go. I look over at my co-pilot, Joe. We check each other all over, make sure we have all our connections, okay? So there's been lots of fatalities out there whenever people have tried to eject, and one of the risers were off. are completely off. Their lap restraints were completely off, and they didn't make it because it wasn't hooked up. So you got to make sure. So I made sure I did a quick look over at Joe. And as I looked, I saw this big pile of stuff, all this crap just piled up. And I looked at Joe. We had our visors on, but you could tell our eyes had met, and we thought the same thing. He looked down, and he grabbed everything. He just threw it as hard as he could. Little did we know we would need those checklists a little bit later. So I made sure everybody was ready. I made the command, OSO eject. So Tom, sitting right here in the back right, pulls his handles. I hear a thump. The hatch leaves, everything depressurizes, and it's loud. Fire tones are still going on at this point. And I hear yelling. I can't really understand what's going on or what's being said as my senses kind of come back, right, as that adrenaline, another adrenaline rush happens. My senses come back. I can hear, and all I can hear is, it didn't work. It didn't work. I said, what the, you mean it didn't work? It's supposed to work. Okay, so I look back, saw Tom, tall dude, saw his goofy feet still hanging there. And there's anytime you have this traumatic type experience, traumatic event, okay? There's temporal distortion. So you never know if it's only been a second, a half a second, or an hour, 10 minutes. So I wanted to make sure that we hadn't gone, or we gave the seat enough time to eject. So when we look forward, look back again. Yep, Tom's still there. As that happened, it registered in my mind a warning and caution in my technical order flashed through my mind, and it says, if the seat retracts, the hatch jettisons, your seat has failed. Registering exactly what that was, I said, cease ejection, we're going to Midland. All right, there wasn't any talk, hey, you guys, get out if you want to. You know, me and Tom are going to ride it in. We're just going, okay? And that was that leadership discussion. We're a team, we're going to handle this all together. Full knowing that if things deteriorated further, your fight or flight instincts would take over and take care of yourself. So it took 3 minutes from the fire light to go on for us to make that ejection attempt. 3 full minutes. We're failed. We're trying to go to Midland. How do I get to Midland, by the way? Remember about the nav system. Zero confidence. So all I remember, hey, it's about northwest. So I start turning the aircraft. I'm trying to, where's my checklist? Shit, it's all the way back there. Luckily, I had another EP checklist out, so I was able to reference that. I'm flying, end up overturning, rolling out, trying to manage this whole sticky situation. And I hear yelling. I can't really understand, so it's very difficult to hear because you got the fire warning tone, which is against your entire being to be sitting in that seat still with that tone going off. You have a window open, which what happens if there's one window open in your car, you get that reverb, boop, 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 and you have the depressurization of the aircraft. So my ears weren't equalized, so it muffled everything. So I couldn't really understand anything that anybody was saying, and Joe, my co-pilot, was saying, but he started giving me hand signals. He's like, all right, so that's how I go that way, which is funny, right? How many millions of dollars in navigation equipment we have in this bomber, and I'm taking hand signals from a lieutenant, of all things. We got pointed in the right direction. Ends up the system wasn't as bad as we thought it was. And we get pointed to Midland. Okay, these tones are still going off, guys. The tones are still going. My job as aircraft commander is to try to get this crew home and to try to land at the nearest piece of concrete in Midland. So I'm trying to get forward. I have all these checklists to run. I lost an entire side of my accessory drives, 2 hydraulic systems, bleed airs, generator, All that stuff affects multiple components, and I have a huge checklist, multiple checklists I have to run. I just couldn't. Anytime I started getting ahead about this is what I'm going to do next, those tones came back in, and I just reel right back to where I was. Okay, small steps forward and just reel back. And I just could not get ahead of the aircraft. That tone went on for another 2 full minutes as we're just sitting there. And eventually all was quiet. Radio transmission. Fires out, fires out. Our wingman responded. Copy, fires out. Got a lot of work to do. Still all those checklists, okay? But I knew that we were going to lead to success, and I knew I had the tools required to overcome this problem and get us safely on the ground at Midland. And it's been a big journey, okay, over almost about 10 years to try to get that position. And this is where all those lessons, which I'm going to tie into this story. Okay, this is so from 2018, this is 9 years earlier at Dyess Air Force Base, my first ops squadron. I had the privilege, I think I mentioned earlier, about deploying to Al Udeid. That's a ridiculous flat top, by the way, and a cheesy mustache. I had the opportunity to fly and fight for my country like I had always wanted to, okay? I had my grandfathers, both served in World War II, great uncle, Bataan Death March survivor. My brother fought in the Iraqi invasion in 2003, and this is all I wanted to do, folks. Remember how I talked about, hey, I wanted to do the whole biology doctor, made the decision, this is it, this is where I wanted to be, and I wanted to get in the fight before the fight was over. So I wanted to be here, and I was loving every minute. Everything in me, I just wanted to be there with my team. So there was a troops in contact that we were called in on May 5th of that year in 2009. And this troops in contact, it was a preemptive that they were expecting troops in contact, and this one patrol was out, very remote area, no backup, no help. And they got reports that they were about to be ambushed. And you could hear the apprehension in this JTAC's voice. And he needed to discourage those guys from attacking. So he called in for a show of force. But at the time, we had just gotten off the tanker, and we were extremely heavy, and too heavy to abide by the procedures that were given or prescribed, the restrictions in order to do that show of force. So as a crew, we made the decision to go ahead anyway, kind of against the guidance, if you will. That story ends with multiple hours go by, discouraged all the attacks. Those guys are thankful, extremely thankful to go back to their fob, safe and sound, everybody in one piece. 24 hours later, we're sitting in our DO's office. We know we're in trouble. Remember, my full being wants, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is what I need to be, this is what I believed in. And I knew I had a bad feeling. What's the worst thing that could happen to me? And that was in the back of my head. So as we're sitting across the table with my DO, and his face, you could read the emotion in his face. And he says, guys, we got to send you home. And my floor just fell out. I mean, that was devastating to me. And the crew, I'm sure. And the lesson learned from that, it took me, after we got the announcement that we had to go home, there was a gathering in the squadron, okay, kind of healing, if you will, to make sure that we were okay, and kind of the squadron, it wouldn't adversely affect the performance of the squadron. And this is a huge mistake. I was ashamed. I didn't even show up. I was convinced that I had let everyone down. Self, team, crew, squadron, parents, you name it. I put every piece of pressure I possibly could on myself. And that's a big regret, because I carried that disappointment on for 5 years. And it wasn't really until 7 years, which is just 2 years ago, that I was finally able to talk to somebody and get past that point. However, so that's a big lesson. So make sure you are taking care of your folks. You never know what they're going through, and pay attention to them. However, this one mistake, it was a wake-up call for me, because I had realized that I probably was being a little too complacent. I didn't really understand and feel like I knew where I was going professionally at that point, and I allowed some external factors in the squadron to negatively affect me and kind of lose that drive to do good, because I didn't really feel that too much of the bigger purpose of really where I was going to go. So that was a springboard for me and a huge wake-up call. By the time I left there, I was determined never to make that kind of mistake again. And the other thing about this mistake, whether it was the right, whether you agree with it or not, from the DO's perspective, from leadership restrictions, it doesn't matter. The two big things I want to take away from it is, first of all, I really wasn't as proficient as I thought I should. I didn't really understand the why behind those rules were there. Where I'm at right now, I understand exactly why those rules were in place. I didn't understand the why. So make sure you're looking into and you start thinking about that. Also, understanding the risk. We did it, not even knowing that we were kind of breaking that one, or bending, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't really understand the consequences. I didn't really think about the risk. Because if I would have weighed the risk knowing that, hey, the worst thing that could happen to me is this, and I'm willing to take the risk, that would have been fine. But I didn't even think about that. I just thought, to hell with it. Let's go with it. This is the right thing to do. So make sure you guys are really analyze that risk, because once you're with yourself, and you really own that decision, there's nothing, you're okay with any outcome. So that's another lesson learned you guys can take. So the follow-on assignment after DIAS was Columbus Air Force Base. Columbus Air Force Base was absolutely wonderful for me because I really came into my own. Okay, at Columbus, there's a couple things. First of all, professionally, it was an incredible opportunity to be a professional aviator and flying my own jet and teaching these students what I knew. And that's where I found my purpose, okay, was teaching those students. That's really what I wanted to do, was teach others what I knew, improve them professionally, personally, okay, and keep them grounded. And it's there also that I really incorporated my leadership opportunity, responsibility with my students. Can you feel that? My students, how I think about my students, they are mine. And I am responsible not only for their lives whenever they are flying with me, but I'm also responsible for how the rest of their professional aviation career will go. Not only that in aviation, but if I allow egos to bloom unchecked, with humility, without humility, okay, that could derail them also. So I wanted to make sure that I passed on those lessons to those guys also. And you can sum up that type of philosophy with be a good human being. No matter what you do in your career, in your life, right? Understand who you're dealing with. Be present with what they're responding to, how they're acting, and be a good human being. You guys have heard talks already about how you treat people, what's not right, what's right. If you just go with be a good human being, it will keep you straight. At Columbus also, I got this little guy that popped up. And two more little guys. Okay, but reeling from that mistake, from the previous assignment, I was focused on this professional. And it isn't until the last 2 years ago that I realized how much I've neglected these guys since then for the last 7 years. and I'll get into that a little bit more. Also, at Columbus, we talked about my students. I also want to talk about leadership and leadership application. So I know there's a lot of things that you guys do here at Cadets at the Academy where you have no idea how that ties into the real world, and it's a huge stretch, all right? As officers in the Air Force, very few of us actually get to lead folks right off the bat. It's going to be a while. So I wasn't a flight commander, and I wasn't responsible for folks until about 5 or 6 years in. But I can tie back the foundations built in my time at ROTC to some things that I did correctly, okay, as a flight commander. We built that foundation, that paradigm, that character that we talked about earlier. There's also responsibility to students, but also the ability and the responsibility given to me by my leadership. And lucky enough, I had commanders, lieutenant colonels, DO, that really trusted me, and I wasn't about to fail those guys, okay? So I made sure, again, focusing on the professional in my class, I was not about to fail those guys. I had a responsibility to them to perform appropriately. Okay, after Columbus, I was at Ellsworth, okay? Back to the B1, I pinned on Major 5 days after showing up to the squadron, and FGO is a big leap, folks. You go from being one of the guys, being an expert, to now you're the bridge from the squadron commander to the CGOs. You have a lot of responsibility with zero actual authority. And that, looking back, so it's still a major, but this tour right here, it really tests your ability to influence others. Do the right thing, be a good human being, because my fingers spread all the way through every shop in that squadron. And I saw the impact of everything I did every single day. And again, I was making up for those mistakes back at that last tour, and I was determined to catch back up to where I thought I needed to be. And that's exactly what I did by the end of this tour. These are my little guys, okay? Luke and Henry. So I mentioned in the previous slide about neglect of the family. There's a work-life balance that I think is not taught. I know it wasn't taught to me. Hopefully you guys are getting something on it. But that is, I think, the strongest struggle that we as professionals will face. Because if you don't focus on yourself, on improving yourself and managing your family, you don't want to know what happens. You don't want to see the result of that. Because I've seen the pain and the struggle that I put my wife through after so many years of not being there whenever I should have. I was physically there, probably not emotionally and mentally there to make sure that she was getting what she needed. And then let's talk about, you can see the impact on the family, right, of our professions and going away. So if you can't see the impact on my son, that was the day I left for this deployment. And he was all smiles and hugs whenever we were saying goodbye because he had no clue. He was only 2.5, 3. So it does have an effect, and you think that, yes, they can push through it. It doesn't matter. That's their job. I have my job. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. But realize if they say they can do it, it doesn't help to have a little bit more help. Okay? Remember that family and remember that impact. After Ellsworth, so that B1 tour, I got to go to staff like I mentioned earlier. So I was at the top of my game. I had made up all the ground I thought that I had lost or squandered away earlier in my career. By the end of that tour, I was at the top of my game. Now I was a part-time flyer, full-time staff. What impacts in my professional ability? Technical skill, right? It's all technical. Proficiency. What impact was that going to have? Was I going to be able to just roll up to the jet? Not much preparation, okay? Or the same amount of preparation that I had as multiple flights per week? No, of course not. And this goes back to those safety reports, guys. because while I was at Barksdale, I was fortunate enough to read another one, got a presentation on one. And there was another aircraft mishap that this pilot, he was flying with a student, and they got in a situation where they shouldn't have. The reaction was delayed, the procedure was delayed, and it was just too slow. And it cost the guy his life. And again, I internalized that and I took that to heart, because there ain't no way that I will be unprepared. And I'm going to hedge all my bets as much as possible to not have that delayed reaction time, because I got responsibilities back home. I can't imagine that. And my student. I'm not going to put that on my student. So it's kind of uncommon, but whenever I fly, anytime I go back to Dias, I always have a warm-up sim. I learned that from some of the part-timers back earlier in my career in Columbus. I always have a warm-up sim. Fly approaches, okay? Do a couple maneuvers. Push those buttons, those fire push buttons. You think that had a play in the success of that next year of this Hawk 9-1 incident? You bet. Always be prepared, folks. So here we are. Tones are out, trucking back up to Midland. At one point, so we slow down. We were in the ejection envelope just in case things go bad. I'm running the checklist. At one point, while I'm running the checklist, Joe's flying on the left side. The jet starts to roll ever so slowly, and I just freeze. And luckily, Joe put the jet right where it was supposed to be, so it was just a little bit oversight. But that was scary. If not, all the other things were scary, right? So we dump fuel to adjust gross weight. We're trucking up all the way up to Midland, and then it's textbook. This hundreds, if not thousands of times. Finished dumping fuel, talked to the approach control, made the call like I've always done every other time before. Through practice, made a right turn onto the runway, lined up for the approach, and I love the way my instructor Wizzo, Leroy, tells it. He said it was the most beautiful sight, because as you banked up and turned onto the runway, he could see the entire town of Midland out that window. And he said, I hope I will never see that sight again. So we put it down, 500 foot down the runway, exactly where I wanted it to be. We rolled out, we came to a complete stop, locked the brakes, and then ran away bravely. And as I'm running away, we clear the runway, running off into the grass. I look back at the jet, and then the trucks are already there, hosing everything down, and steam coming up off the aircraft. As we come to a stop off the runway, and I am just adrenaline flowing. I swear I'd be like Hulk. It was that much, okay? So I took off my helmet, and I threw it as hard as I could, and I was just stiff, shaking. And I just had to take a couple steps, walk away. Guys asked, hey man, you all right? I was like, just give me a minute. And you can feel, I could feel the emotion starting to, we made it through this. We made it through this. And as that was about to start, I thought, it's not over yet. We still got stuff to do. And this is as my wingman is circling ahead and making sure we're all right. Pick up the phone. I got my cell phone. That's my emergency radio. Pick up my cell phone. About to call the squadron, tell them exactly what's going on. I said, oh, shoot, I got to call my wife. So call the wife, the real command post, right? Say, hey, honey, had to divert. We had a real bad emergency. It was really bad. We're all safe. Call mom and dad. Hung up the phone. Okay, now it's time to call the squadron. Oh, I got to call my boss. So I call back to my boss. Guess what? That's in 8th Air Force Headquarters, which is in charge of the wing. And I let them know what's going on. And shortly thereafter, they got that whole building spun up, and it ended up reaching all the way back to the squadron. Not the real way that it's supposed to happen, but it was a little just a victim of the circumstances there. Then I call the squadron, call the ops desk. The DO's sitting at the desk. And they say, hey, it's Major Duhon on the phone. He passed him the desk. He's like, I say, hey, man, we landed. And before I could say anything, hey, guys, you ready for the crew swap? Because we were supposed to land and do a crew swap, and they were supposed to do another sortie. Like, no, man, I started explaining the situation. So the squadron commander then lands, okay, and then we go all the way back to, he drives, the squadron commander drives, he's shaken up pretty bad. He meets us at the airfield. And seeing him, like I said, we have a long history together. That was pretty emotional also. Once he came back, he's pretty shaken up. So, this is how everything ended up. This is me, this is Leroy, Tom, and my co-pilot Joe. This is Hawk 9-1, like I said, tail 109. It took them 4 or 5 months to repair the jet in flyable condition, and then they flew it out on 3 engines up to depot at Tinker. Anybody raise your hand if you saw the social media stuff going on about Hawk 9-1 last summer? So within about an hour or two of this whole thing going down, this post shows up on social media, and a couple posts down, it says, hey, there's an emergency, this B-1 landed, how it malfunctioned, and they're like, blah, 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 yeah, those B-1s break all the time, all that other stuff, and then one guy says, hey, why is there something missing from the jet? All right, and then later on it leaks, this picture leaked out with the fire damage. So here's a picture of the damage. I know we're running short on time, but scorch marks all throughout. This is engine number 3 and number 4. This is looking aft to the engine. You got scorch marks all throughout, big hole right here, and then this is the big hole here, so to speak. This is my hand. I was later told that that's a lot of toxic stuff, so I'll be reporting that for my disability later on. Okay, who wants to know what caused the fire? All right, what causes explosions? Fuel, right? And lots of things, bombs, we didn't have any bombs. All right, so it's fuel, okay? There was a pretty good-sized fuel leak there, so about a barrel of fuel had leaked and pooled into that engine. So whenever it met the right heat, air, fuel mixture, and our wingman had reported he saw one small and one large explosion from the aircraft. This is a little bit after we were told it's probably not good to just hang out underneath the jet. We walked away, and then I looked back and I saw the clouds rolling in with the jet, and I thought, man, this looks pretty cool. Everything worked out. And just trying to see some calm, right? Because the adrenaline's still running. All right, so sum it up. I know we're about a minute left here. So to sum everything up, we talked about finding your switch. We talked about owning your mistakes. We talked about complacency, finding your why. Simon Sinek, okay, if you want to read about him. He's got a lot of good stuff. We talked about the catalyst for my failures moving forward into getting caught up. And we also talked about the work-family balance, and I can't stress to you strong enough about how to manage that. Okay? And then the last thing, this kind of sums it up about really internalizing everything. You guys talk about maybe some consternation with the wing and the attitudes of the wing. Just read this right here, okay? You can't affect other people. It starts with me. This is from a blog, Stable Leadership, which is a beautiful metaphor, in my opinion. So it starts with me. It starts with my conscious decision to make a positive and lasting impact upon the lives of the people within the organization to which I belong. It starts with my mindset. It starts with my determination, grit, and enthusiasm. Thanks, guys.